Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. All right, welcome back for another episode. My name is Michael Hefner. I'll be your host today, and I am back with the founders of ICCG, Grant McQuilkin and Dave Parker. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you, Michael?
Good, doing well. Today, we're going to be talking about post-merger integration. So after the merger, after the acquisition, everything's not done, right? There's still the transition phase. So first, want to talk about what steps can be taken to align the operational process of two merging companies.
Okay, before Grant answers that question, because there's a lot. Actually, I think we both have a lot to say about that. I want to address why you're even asking us this question, because we know just from experience that there are a lot of intermediaries or brokers or whatever you want to call them, that once they get the initial agreement signed, LOI signed, they're kind of handing it off to attorneys, and they don't have any clue. They don't care. Yeah, it's hands off as far as transition. So I appreciate you asking us that question, because we, as a lot of other intermediaries we've met that deal with the businesses like in similar businesses like we do, are in the weeds on the transition. And that's one thing we tell the business owners from the beginning. Our fee doesn't stop. Just our fee, we're going to help you script as much as we can the transition. We can't do it for you. We can't walk in and be the people, although we have sat on some of those meetings. But, we're not going to keep holding hands weeks afterwards. But there are some things that happen operationally that will make a transition a lot smoother. Because what we care about are two happy parties, three happy parties. We like to be happy too, but we like for buyer and seller to be happy. And we want it to be a win-win, right? And so that's why that's such an important question. So Michael, so thank you for asking it. Now Grant, you can just jump in and answer the whole question. I'll jump in if I can.
Yeah, there's a lot of new. You dive in, you've just bought the company, you dive in and you're just looking at a lot, you're trying to learn as much as you possibly can. There's a desire to change immediately without getting to know everything. And that's a mistake. Everybody knows that, but you want to make a difference as quickly as possible. There's a lot of new for the employees that their company just got bought. They're getting to know you. They're getting new benefit plans. A lot of times they're getting, all those kinds of changes, which is really, really hard. And so everybody, is tense. Sometimes, because of the rumor mill, everybody's in survival mode. Trying to, figure out whether they're going to have a job, whether their job's going to change, how's my life going to be different. And so you're, as a buyer, you're walking into an environment that is hopefully not going to stay that way. But it's difficult. There's lots of feelings, right? And so I know I get teased that I don't know what that means, but there's a lot of feeling going on, and
you've been working on your feeling words, Grant. It's okay.
That's right. Maybe next time we do this, we'll get a feelings wheel.
Should we illustrate that for everybody? Could you tell us what you're feeling right now? We kind of illustrate that for our listeners.
That's right. My wife is firm that I don't know what feelings are. Yeah, and so you can't just take two companies and smash them together and say, get along, if you do that, it comes with a ton of risk, and it is done. There's a lot of people who just go at people who roll up a whole bunch of, for example, home services businesses, they just buy them. And they say, here's your new logo. Here's your new contracts. Let's go. Here's your new pricing model. And I got to be honest with you, sometimes it works. But is not without a whole lot of collateral damage. And so, developing a plan and a combined leadership team that is, all for one for all, gonna ride for the right brand. All of that is it just takes leadership skills, not just a skilled purchaser of businesses. You have to go in there and lead, or you have to hire somebody that's capable of going in there and leading. And so, sometimes it takes time, or it takes resources. It just depends on which method you pick.
You talked about all the changes that the employees are going to encounter, and then you also talked about having the right leaders in play. How can those leaders and other decision makers retain or identify and retain top talent in the transition?
Yeah, that's really important. And I think part of that has to do with when a business owner reads them into what's going on. In other words, lets them into the circle. A lot of business owners, and I understand why, we totally understand why, want to keep everything quiet till the very last minute. And that works to a point, but it can be so earth-shattering when they walk in one day that they've been sold. It can be so earth-shattering they lose everybody, right? And so I think, we've probably the most successful ones we've seen are when that business owner gets those key employees that he knows are super important for the retention of the business to come on board and reads them in early and allows us to work with them. In fact, oftentimes they are the ones who are producing a lot of the due diligence information, which then they're learning about the buyer in the process. They're including the buyer meetings and things like that. So I think getting them early on, getting them exposure to the buyers, helping the buyers understand who these folks are that are really running the business. Normally, I would say, I don't know, Grant, probably I would say 75% of the time when a business is, the types of businesses we deal with, that a lot of them are run by, founding owners. By the time they're ready to sell, they've normally got a couple people that are really running the business for them. They're not calling the shots every day. So getting them involved in that process, perhaps encouraging the owner to get some equity into their hands before they even put it on the market can be a huge benefit for retention, especially if they're rolling equity into the new platform company, if that's what it's going to be.
Yes, and sometimes that can be vested over time, where they get, almost a deferred bonus plan as long as they stay around, right? If they're critical to the business. I would say the other mistake buyers make when they go in and buy businesses is, particularly if they're buying a founder-led business, typically the A-type baby boomer, it's my way or the highway. And so there's a level of frustration amongst the junior management team that their suggestions are not necessarily listened to. And so a buyer can come in and really make his job easier by listening to some of this, suggestions. So sitting down with those management team and just say, hey, okay, if you were boss, if you were in my position, what would you do? That is different than what you're doing today. And so giving a voice to those particular people who generally have been told, no, you're going to do it my way for many years, gives a lot of, runway with those people. I think you also get some really good ideas out of it. And some of them you're not going to follow, but you retain people because they think they're making a difference. You're going to pay them similar compensation, if not more. You can always play with the compensation, But compensation adjustments are only as good as your competition are not willing to match it, right? People really want to feel like they are contributing, like they are appreciated, and none of that's new. But when you're buying a company, because of the quote unquote feelings that we've talked about, it's good to make sure that those employees that are staying, that you want to keep, feel valued.
Makes me think about when I was a manager in big box retail, and one of the best things that I heard from as a strategy for new managers was coming into the store and going around and talking to every employee and saying, "Hey, what can this store do differently? What can make this store better?" And then they gave themselves a deadline for everything that made sense to change, and gave themselves a deadline to go make those things happen and bring those people in as part of it, right? And they get a lot of buy-in that way. So that's great.
That's a really great way. Can I add one thing to the retention for buyers coming in and dealing with top talent? Is I think the question was, and retaining the top talent. I would say one of the key things is just to be brutally honest. What you don't want to do is come in and bait them to stick around when you're planning on canning them. And I think coming in fact, we always tell buyers, don't come into diligence or anything telling a bunch of lies to cover up what's really going on. Let's figure out the honest way to do it, because once you tell one lie, you're always going to be known as a liar. So, when you're dealing with a top talent, if they're on edge and they've got a performance that they've got to meet, you just got to be really direct, because they don't want to get into a situation either where they're going to, be strung out there and all of a sudden not have it. That happened to me. When I sold my first business, I thought I was going to be running the whole area. And I was dumb enough. I didn't know how to protect myself. I didn't even think about it. I was trusted these guys, and I was canned, and it was like, well, wait a minute. What I didn't know is they had been talking to all my managers behind my back and decided, well, they couldn't handle this without the top guy. Okay. I'm happy to say that company's not around today, but I'm just sorry. That sounds like an arrogant. Yeah, well, okay. Anyways.
Nothing like retribution.
Nothing like
Tastes
retribution.
good, doesn't it?
That's a long, involved story. What's funny about that? I learned more. I think Grant, this first when Grant and I had known each other for about a year or so, and we were both involved. He helped me as my CPA before we were business partners do this transaction. I think we learned more about what not to do out of that transaction. It went everything from that, how to protect people. So I think a lot of what we do with our sellers comes out of our own mistakes in our own business dealings. And those are some of the most valuable lessons you'll ever get. No book can teach you, but do it once to me and I'll make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else.
Yeah.
Also, just want to recognize the fact, Dave, what you said about bringing in your top people. It can kind of sound counterintuitive to a lot of business owners. Because one, they're like, hey, I'm on my way out. Why would I put in that extra effort? It's not, the sales price is the sales price, all those things. But I think business owners that are considering bringing their business, they just got to think through, if they were on the other side of the table and they're seeing all these key players that they're going to get to work with after the transaction is through, being part of that process and just getting to interact with them and kind of see the value they're going to bring on the front side, like that's going to bring value. If nothing else, that's going to secure the deal and help it to go more smoothly, but can definitely even add value to the business. So
right, and one of our so we've been buy side on some deals here in the last couple of years, and one of them was in a space which I won't mention, but we were led to believe several things from the seller, and I tell you what, it got to closing a week after closing, and it was anything but what they said, and so sellers. So there's a piece of I think what you've just said basically, Michael, is have integrity when you sell your business, be willing to stick through the transition and do what you say you're going to do, and don't mince your words and don't be deceptive, and because that never turns out well, and that person's name is still a joke, around our buyer's company. And everything that's being done now on future transactions is is much of it's being done and protected because of what happened there. So once again, fool me once, but next time there won't be a next time.
So I think maybe there's a pattern there, Dave, that we could make a rule out of, and that is people that are like our typical client, our founding, people that have owned a business for 38 years, for example, they seem to understand legacy a little bit differently than the people that have owned a business for 2 or 3, 4 years. The guys that have own a business for 2, 3, 4 years, and they're selling their business, they're not thinking the business is their legacy, and so the way they care for people in the business, as well as care about the buyer being successful after they sell the business, is very unfortunately predictable. And so if you're buying a business from somebody who hasn't run it for a long time, hasn't got a whole lot of relationships with the current employees, you're going to have to mitigate that risk.
Right. So it's a great point.
That's great. So we talked a lot about the transition of employees, but someone else that might be affected are the customers in the business. So it may not be as great, but still needs to be considered. So what are some ways that the new business owners can ensure a smooth transition regarding the customers?
It's industry specific, Michael. That's a kind of a really broad question. But I think overall, when you deal with a smaller business, let's say, sub $20 million, they've got a lot of personal relationships with oftentimes with customers and everything. And that sometimes they become really guarded about that and thinking that really, I don't know what they're going to do because, I'm probably the only one who can really fulfill this. And what we find out in most cases is once we get a new buyer in front of the customers at some point or whatever, it all works out. Because really, not to be brutal or anything, but what a customer really wants is the product, or the service, right? And so as long as they can continue to get the product or the service, they'll get over the fact they're not dealing with their best friend anymore. And that's sometimes, again, there's a psychology there you have to kind of walk through with both buyers and sellers. Seasoned buyers will understand that, and they won't push the envelope. And one of the things we often do is have especially if it's like a founding owner, to stick around and make those introductions themselves, write that letter of introduction, or literally sit down and with these people and introduce them and talk about how great it's going to be and kind of script that message for them. We've done that quite a bit, haven't we, Grant?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say it's particularly difficult when you have customers that have dealt with the owner, and now all of a sudden they're dealing with a sales department. And they got to call and be on hold for 30 minutes where they had the cell phone number of the owner in the previous regime. So buyers are smart. They mitigate that risk by having an earnout. Look, if sales dip below this amount, then the sales price goes down. Or if and we always try to negotiate a little bit of upside and make it worth for the seller to stick around to transfer those relationships and say, hey, if the sales go up, then I need a little bit more for my time. So I think it's difficult, and it takes it takes internal and external selling. So if you sell your employees on the value of the merging of the companies, then they will typically sell the customer on it. And you just got to work hard on both the internal and external selling. You can tell your customer all you want, but if your employees are unhappy with the merger, then they're going to look for an opportunity to leave. You have to understand, anytime there is a change, it's an excuse for your customer to look elsewhere. And so you have to give them constantly a great case to stay with the company.
That's a good point. I like that. Sell internally before you sell externally. That's good.
Well, that is all the time that we have today. But Grant, Dave, thanks for joining me again for this episode.
You're welcome. Thanks, Michael.
And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.